Hello, welcome to the Smoking Sun channel. This video will not focus on murders as many of my previous videos have, but instead it will focus more on a man that led a remarkable life. And before we get going, please hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell. And here we go. Ferdinand Waldo Demara, known as Fred, was born in Lawrence, Massachusetts in December 1921. Despite experiencing financial stability early in life, his family faced hardships during the Great Depression, prompting a move to a less affluent neighborhood. While there, Fred demonstrated early signs of cleverness when he convinced a local store to give him and his friends free chocolates. And while growing up with his father working as a film projectionist and his uncle owning movie theaters, Fred was immersed in the world of actors and imagery. Additionally, he developed a strong interest in Christianity, which would remain a constant throughout his life. At the age of 16, Fred left home and found himself in Central Falls, Rhode Island. There he joined a Cistercian monastery as a novice. After a rough 4 years, he departed the monastery with the abbot believing his talents were better suited for the outside world. With war emerging, Fred enlisted in the United States Army, but finding it tougher than the regulations of the monastery, he soon decided to desert. Now it was during that period where Fred would assume the identity of an army buddy named Anthony Ignolia, making this the first time he would assume a different identity. Using Ignolia's name, he joined the United States Navy, intending to become an officer, but his forgeries of paperwork was soon discovered, leading him to depart the Navy. Seeking refuge, Fred returned to the monastic life in a Cistercian monastery in Kentucky, this time assuming the identity of Robert Linton Finch. Robert Finch was a real doctor who Fred assumed the identity of. Now Fred would assume the identities of people who were living in relative obscurity and obtaining documents such as birth certificates and universities through the mail. With Dr. Finch's name, Fred enrolled at DePaul University in Chicago to study philosophy and ethics. Despite excelling academically, he could not commit to taking holy orders due to fear of exposure and the expectations associated with being an impostor. Fred would disappear again, leaving behind the identity of Robert Finch. After re-emerging, Fred settled in Erie, Pennsylvania, where he took on the role of a psychology instructor at a university. Later, he relocated to Los Angeles, where he worked as an orderly in a sanitarium for a period of time. Capitalizing on the identity of Robert Finch and utilizing the acquired credentials, he secured another teaching position, this time in psychology at a university in Washington State. Despite lacking formal education in the subject, Fred managed to stay one step ahead of his students by diligently studying the textbook. He found contentment at Washington State, enjoying his teaching role, and unintentionally grew complacent, establishing a friendship with the local sheriff, Fred Tamlin. Fred was even appointed as a special deputy, publicly endorsing Sheriff Tamlin's re-election campaign through speeches. However, everything changed when the sheriff unexpectedly arrived with an arrest warrant for Fred. At the police station, Fred encountered 2 FBI agents who had identified him as a deserter. Consequently, he endured an 18-month sentence at the United States Disciplinary Barracks in San Pedro, California. Upon his release from prison, Fred briefly returned to his hometown of Lawrence. However, the allure of assuming a fresh identity proved irresistible to him. This time, he made the choice to adopt the persona of a Dr. Cecil Hammond, a biologist residing in Kentucky. Under this new name, Fred secured a position at Massachusetts Eye and Ear, a renowned hospital affiliated with Harvard that remains in operation to this day, offering a combination of education, treatment, and research. Concurrently, Fred enrolled in the evening law classes, although he only completed the first year without obtaining any qualifications. Fred strongly believed in learning through the hands-on experience, favoring on-the-job training. Along these endeavors, he made the decision to depart from Boston and set his sights on Alfred, Maine, heading northward. In the state of Maine, Fred once again embraced a religious position, this time as a member of the Brothers of Christian Instruction, an esteemed teaching order. The brothers warmly welcomed Fred, considering him a highly accomplished individual. The local newspapers even featured an article highlighting his arrival, which spelled early disaster for Fred. A student of the real Dr. Hammond came across the news story and decided to inform the genuine Dr. Hammond. And by a stroke of luck, Dr. Hammond happened to be a procrastinator who never got around to taking any actions against Fred. During his tenure with the brothers, Fred contributed significantly to their venture, particularly in navigating the red tape required for the institution to be recognized as American College. His extensive experience in manipulating systems proved invaluable in this regard. Before formally taking his vow, Fred was sent to New Brunswick, Canada, to study theology. It was there that he struck up a friendship with a local general practitioner named Dr. Sear. According to Fred's account, the bond originated when Dr. Sear treated a fellow monk for arthritis. Learning of Fred's background as a quote-unquote biologist before joining the monastery, Dr. Sear sought his advice. Fred had come across an article in a medical journal discussing the use of bee venom in arthritis treatments and suggested it to Dr. Sear. Remarkably, the treatment proved successful, significantly bolstering Dr. Sear's admiration of Fred. This admiration led to a critical error on Dr. Sear's part. As Fred returned to Maine, Dr. Sear mistakenly asked him to transport his medical credentials with him. The purpose behind this request was Dr. Sear's aspiration to obtain an American medical license in addition to his existing Canadian one. However, the reality of these credentials would never reach their intended destination. When Fred returned to Maine, he received news that the brothers had successfully acquired their college charter. But to his disappointment, he learned that he had not been chosen as the head of the college, leading to feelings of anger and resentment. Fueled by these emotions, he decided to quote-unquote borrow one of the brothers' automobiles and swiftly made his way to Boston. From there, he took a bus back to New Brunswick. When he arrived, Fred made a deliberate choice to enter a Navy recruiting office using Dr. Sears' credentials to enlist as a Navy surgeon. In the spring of 1951, he received an assignment to a naval base in Halifax for a period of 2 months. During his time there, Fred fell in love with a local woman, which may have been a unique experience in his life. The couple made plans to marry once Fred completed his tour of duty. However, during this period, Canada was actively involved in the Korean War. In June, Fred set out on the destroyer Cayuga as part of his military service obligations. Fred's routine responsibilities on the Cayuga included a wide range of medical tasks, from routine treatments and diagnosis to even minor procedures, like extracting a problematic tooth for a captain. Given his lack of experience in the dentistry, Fred resorted to stalling the captain and quickly read up on the subject to gain knowledge of the procedure. Despite his initial apprehension, he managed to successfully complete the tooth extraction, maintaining the illusion of his expertise. But then Fred faced a big challenge when the ship arrived in Korea. A Korean ship brought 3 injured men, one of them who had a bullet stuck in his heart, needed surgery. And Fred knew it would be difficult because the ship didn't have the right tools to keep things clean, and he had never done the surgery before. Still, he found the bravery to go ahead. He decided to make small cuts to avoid having to sew too much. Amazingly, the surgery worked and the Korean soldier's life was saved. But this big accomplishment changed everything for Fred. It was the moment when his secret lies and pretending started to catch up with him. The results of his actions that would eventually cause his failures soon began. When Fred arrived in Korea, he was shocked and saddened by the terrible conditions and lack of medical help available. Because he deeply cared about helping others as a Christian, he felt strongly that he had to do something and asked the captain if he can help as a volunteer in the community. Fred's selfless dedication quickly gained attention, and people started to admire him for his unselfish actions. His reputation grew even more when a military leader in the area personally praised him for the amazing things he was doing. Eventually, the ship's radio officer, who understood the importance of being mentioned in official messages, decided to write about Fred's adventures. The story included the gripping details of the surgery Fred performed on the ship's deck to save someone's life. Despite Fred's effort to stop the officer, the temptation of getting recognized was too strong to resist. As fate would have it, the radio officer's story caught the interest of the media corps and found its way into the newspapers, drawing widespread attention. The real Dr. Sear, upon reading about these heroic exploits, was taken aback by the news and immediately reported the matter to the appropriate authorities. Consequently, the captain of the Cayuga was contacted, leading to a series of inquiries and investigations. Though the captain staunchly asserted that the existence must be some mistake, he was ultimately compelled to send Fred back to Canada. Fred cherished his time in the Canadian Navy, and even after his true identity was revealed, his shipmates remained loyal and sent a Christmas card showing their friendship despite his flaws. However, thorough investigations exposed Fred's deceptions and fake names. To avoid negative attention, the authorities decided to deport him back to the United States. Returning home, Fred spoke to a journalist from Life magazine, hoping to tell his side of the story. The article mentioned his disappearance and Fred traveling across the country, working various jobs and occasionally using fake names, and Fred's battle of guilt and his fear of being exposed. In 1955, Fred took on the persona of Dr. Benjamin Jones and applied to work at the Texas Department of Corrections. He knew his application would eventually reach the right person and even created 8 fake character references. Fred started as a guard at a prison farm, but was disturbed by the harsh conditions and the brutality of the guards. He transferred to the Prison Recreation Department, hoping to create a more positive environment. He performed well and became the deputy warden at a new prison called Shamrock, designed for violent inmates. Despite the challenges, Fred excelled because of his understanding of psychology, fearlessness, and the occasional use of tranquilizers. He joked that it was like Texas' first hospital for the criminally insane. However, one prisoner recognized Fred from the Life magazine interview. When confronted by his superior, Fred denied any connection. But once out of sight, he hastily packed his belongings, retreated from his room, and swiftly left in his car, abandoning everything behind. In 1956, Fred arrived in North Haven Island as Martin Goggart, a teacher. He taught English and Latin and became well liked by the locals. However, Fred's drinking raised suspicion, and a mother ordered an old issue of Life magazine. Confirming her suspicions, she collected Fred's fingerprints on a glass and sent them to the FBI. On February 14, 1957, Fred was arrested and removed from the island. Fortunately, the judge showed leniency and sentenced him to 2 months of probation for lacking a legitimate teacher's license. A biography of Fred's life titled The Great Impostor was published in 1959, which brought him fame and made him well known. Using his newfound fame, Fred ventured into the entertainment world and played a minor role in a Hollywood film called The Hypnotic Eye. But Fred realized he did not enjoy real acting. During his time in Los Angeles, Fred appeared on Groucho Marx's game show, You Bet Your Life. He showed his charm and humor while discussing his various credentials. Fred and his partner won $2,000 on the show. Fred even joked about donating his share to the Feed and Clothe Fred Demara Fund. In 1961, a film called The Great Impostor, based on Fred's life, was released. Fred wasn't happy with how he was portrayed by Tony Curtis in the movie. By then, Fred gained a considerable amount of weight that affected his health. He decided to leave his life of impression and became a counselor at a home shelter in downtown Los Angeles. In 1967, Fred earned a degree from a Bible college and became chaplain at a hospital in Anaheim, California. In 1970, his past threatened his job, but the chief of staff vouched for him, allowing him to keep his position. Fred focused on his role as chaplain and did not talk much about his past. By 1980, Fred's health declined, and he could not work as a chaplain anymore. He became a patient himself and passed away in 1982 from complications due to diabetes. Fred had remarkable qualities, but that was overshadowed by his tendency to impersonate others and commit crimes. In the end, Fred's life became a tragedy marked by missed opportunities and failure to embrace his true self. It's regrettable that we will never know what the great impostor could have achieved if he had chosen honesty over deception. That concludes this video, and if you enjoyed it, please hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell. See you next time.